Hi everyone. This video's goal is to connect the readings that you've done for this unit to the major assignment for the unit, which is the essay discussion board post in English 1002. I apologize ahead of time if you hear my dog barking in the background. I'm working from home while making this, but hopefully he'll stay quiet and we can talk about how to connect our sources to our essay. So, of course, you want to be sure that you complete all of the readings for the unit. Don't rely only on this presentation because those readings have like much more detail, many more examples, and a lot more nuance and a lot more information. But this video is just going to go over some of the highlights for you. So, using sources well for your essay discussion board post. First of all, of course, in any academic writing, when we're using sources, we always need to be careful to choose highly credible sources. So, for this specific assignment, the good news is that your source is already selected for you. We're using the novel Parable of the Sower by Octavia Butler as our primary source and the only source for this assignment. But whenever we're using research and sources, and in this essay using Butler's ideas, we want to make sure that we represent them fairly and accurately and to reflect the author's intent. So we should never misrepresent what a source says. We should never change the wording. We should never change the spirit of it. We want to make sure that we are fairly and accurately representing what it is the author has to say. And in this specific assignment, you should use that source to support your personal reflection, not to overshadow it. So it's important that your voice remains sort of the loudest and the most dominant in this essay. And then you can balance your voice with some quotations and paraphrases from the novel to help support your ideas. So, as far as where to use your source information in your essay post, there are a couple places you can include that information. So, yes, you can use a quote as an attention getter in your introductory paragraph. You might consider using a quotation as like a final sentence in your conclusion to kind of help wrap up the essay. But a more important place to use those quotations and paraphrases is going to be in your body paragraphs as support for your ideas on whatever theme it is that you picked up on for this assignment. So it might be like community, resilience, your beliefs, your experiences. But again, a sophisticated way to use sources and to show that you're understanding and interacting with them is to use them to support the actual ideas in your essay. So, a couple tips on that would be first of all, to avoid using source information in a topic sentence or in a conclusion sentence. And again, all this information applies to this assignment, but it also like expand that thinking out to all of academic writing at large. So, it's typically a good idea in any type of research writing to avoid using a quote or a paraphrase in a topic sentence. So, just as a reminder, a topic sentence is the first sentence in a body paragraph. It identifies the main idea of the paragraph and it also supports the thesis statement. So, in order to keep your voice and your thoughts at the forefront of your essay, we want to stay away from using source information in a topic sentence. Same idea for the concluding sentence in the paragraph. We want to keep your voice the loudest, and there we're typically wrapping up our ideas and transitioning into the next paragraph. So avoid using evidence in those as well. On the screen in front of you, you will also see a typical structure for a body paragraph. So you can consider constructing your body paragraphs like this if it's helpful for you. So again, you'll start with that topic sentence that identifies the main idea of the paragraph and supports the thesis statement. And then you're ready to develop that topic sentence with some details and some evidence. So that might include adding a quotation or adding a paraphrase from your sources, in this case from Butler's novel. You would then explain how those details and that evidence supports the main idea in the topic sentence. And then you're ready to conclude the paragraph and transition to the next one. So, in academic writing, it's a good idea in general, and in this essay, to use a balance of quotations and paraphrases. So, readers really enjoy it when we use a variety of source uses. It just keeps your writing more engaging. So, a good place to use or a good time to use direct quotations is when the language from your source is like striking, right? They've worded it really powerfully or, just so perfectly that you must have it. or if it really relates to your point. That's a great place to use direct quotes. Paraphrases, on the other hand, are also fabulous to use because A, they keep your voice the most dominant in the essay, right? Because you have to transform that source's information into your own language and your own sentence structure. And B, they help you show a deep understanding of your source. So it's really simple to just like copy and paste a quotation. You don't even necessarily need to understand it to do that, right? You could just grab it and drop it into your essay. But when you paraphrase your research, you sort of must have an understanding of it to be able to express it in your own language. So in many cases, I think paraphrases are actually more sophisticated. And again, they also help to keep your voice as the most dominant in the essay. I do recommend that you limit your use of block quotations in academic writing and in this essay. Just as a reminder, block quotations are those longer quotes. So in MLA style, we're referring to quotes that are 4 lines or longer in your typed essay. And they have a special format. You can refer to the style book to see what that format looks like. But what you would never want to do is like just use block quotes to eat up the space in your essay. So make sure that you spread that material evenly across your post and don't over rely on block quotations. Sometimes they are useful, sometimes they are appropriate, but we don't want to like totally rely on them all the time. Now, as we're integrating our source use into our essay and into our writing, we want to make sure that we're doing that gracefully and effectively. So, one rule to keep in mind, again, in sort of all academic writing, is that the first time we mention a source, we're going to use their full name, like Octavia Butler. And then after that, we want to use the last name only. So, you'll notice in the examples that follow, you're going to only see Butler's last name. We'll assume that we've already mentioned her full name one time in the writing. And whenever we're using a quotation, we always want to introduce them and integrate them into a longer sentence. That helps us avoid what we call a floating quotation. So there's several methods in the style book that you can refer to for help with this, but we are typically going to introduce those quotes with some information about the author, probably their name, or just like with some context from the novel. So notice I have 2 examples here. They both give you the author and page number, but the author's name occurs in different places. So in the first example, we have Butler writes, taking care of other people can be a good cure for nightmares. And then we have our parenthetical citation with the page number. So in this case, we use the author's name to introduce the quote. In the second example, we have the author writes, taking care of other people can be a good cure for nightmares. So in this case, we cited the author's name and the page number in that parenthetical citation. So the author's name must occur either in the introduction to the quote or in the parenthetical citation, but we don't need to have it both places. That would be redundant. And remember, in this particular assignment, you're going to need to include at least 3 quotations or paraphrases throughout the essay. So whenever you're working on an assignment for another course or later in your career, make sure that you stick to whatever those requirements would be. For this one, we're going to include at least 3 quotations or paraphrases, and we need to make sure we use correct MLA style in-text citations. So the basic format for that is the author's last name plus a page number. Now, of course, later in the semester, as we bring in more types of sources, there are, differences in the way that they are cited, right? Like sometimes you might have a source without an author, and we'll be covering how to cite those in your readings. So here's an example of an MLA style citation. And again, notice that the quotation fits smoothly into a longer sentence so that it's not a floating quote. Lauren's resilience shines through when she claims, here's our quote, taking care of other people can be a good cure for nightmares. And there's our parenthetical citation. So again, you want to make sure that all the quotations fit naturally into your sentences. And there are some methods given in the style book and in the Little Seal handbook that you can reference for assistance with that. Now, of course, in any academic research, it is super important that the sources we choose are highly credible sources. So again, in this essay, we already have it chosen for us. We know it's credible. It's a primary source. It's a novel that we're going to write about. But later in the semester, when you're asked to use outside sources, you must ensure that they are highly, highly credible. So we're going to be looking for things like books by experts. We're going to be looking for scholarly sources like academic articles. We're going to be looking only for websites that are highly reliable and highly credible. What we want to stay away from are sort of just like random sources. So don't just go to Google, type in a search term, and grab the first source that you find. That doesn't make it authoritative. So we want to stay away from unverified websites, random blogs, random sources, unless you know that they are clearly authoritative. And again, we'll be reminding you and reading about evaluating sources and making sure that they're high quality. You'll definitely also want to be sure to avoid AI generated content when you're researching. AI will create fake information, it will create phony sources, it will create bogus citations. And after 18 years of teaching English, I have to say, I think I'm very good at identifying AI generated content. And I will be double checking the sources that you submit this semester to make sure that they are legitimate. And as it says in the syllabus, any AI generated content could lead to you failing the entire course as well as other repercussions within the school. So I strongly, strongly urge you to just engage in an effective research process, and you're going to come up with better stuff than AI would anyway. So stay away from it. Plagiarism is, of course, a concern in all academic writing, as it is in your essay and discussion board posts. So here's some sort of initial advice for avoiding plagiarism. When you are quoting using a direct quotation, you want to make sure you quote the words exactly verbatim. So you'll want to make sure that you place quotation marks around any direct quotes and also make sure that you cite it. Forgetting any of that is technically plagiarism. So if you were to use a direct quote without quotation marks, it's technically considered plagiarism. Now, do keep in mind that you can adjust quotes as it has stated in the style book and in the Little Seagull Handbook. So you can use brackets to insert something into a quote to clarify it. You can use the ellipses mark to omit material from a quote if you don't need it. And you can refer to the style book for more information on that. But otherwise, we want to make sure that we're sticking exactly to that quoted material. When you're paraphrasing, you want to make sure that you're doing it thoroughly. So transforming the source's language into your own words and your own sentence structure. Remember, it's not enough to just plug in a couple synonyms here and there throughout the sentence. That's still considered something called mosaic plagiarism. The sentence structure itself and the wording must be like sort of thoroughly transformed. And again, very important to keep in mind, you must cite paraphrases just the same way that you would cite a direct quotation. I always advise my writers also just to cite it as you write it. So, a really common way that unintentional plagiarism occurs is writers who tell themselves, oh, I'll just come back later on and insert my citations. And then inevitably, what happens is some of the citations get forgotten, they get skipped over, or you run out of time and you're not able to get it completed. And then you've got, plagiarized material on your hands. So it can definitely be helpful to keep notes of your quotes and your page numbers. You might consider using a physical note card like an index card, or you might use an electronic note card. And there's an option in Noodle Tools that you could use to create e-note cards. So we'll talk about that more later in the semester. But if you want to jump into Noodle Tools and check it out, it's pretty self-explanatory. So if you're unsure about anything to do with plagiarism, please ask me or visit the Writing Center. We will be happy to help you. And again, avoid using AI to generate quotations or citations. It not only just makes errors, but it also generates completely fake sources, completely fake quotes. And I will spend a long time tracking every source down. So don't rely on AI. It's not going to give you legit stuff. It might do that thing where, like, maybe it gives you a real author, but it's a fake journal, or maybe it's a real author in a real journal, but it has the page numbers wrong and the essay is not included in that edition. And again, I'll be checking all that. So stay away from AI. Your own research is not only going to serve your own critical thinking and research skills better, but it's going to serve your grade better as well. So you definitely want to make sure, of course, that your writing is always organized and that it's clear and has a pleasing flow. So one of the most important things to start with is a clear controlling idea. So you're going to include that in your introductory paragraph in a thesis statement, which usually occurs near the end of the introductory paragraph, as you've learned. And that helps kind of control all the ideas throughout the essay. You should also consider using transitions between your paragraphs and then when moving like between ideas and quotations, etc. So if you need a refresher on transitional words and phrases, there is a handout available in the course resources area on Brightspace. So go ahead and check that out. I think it will be helpful if you need a refresher on that. I do advise using a sort of standard, structure for this initial essay and discussion board post, and then later in the semester we'll sort of deviate from it. So your readers will expect an introduction. They're going to expect some body paragraphs, usually at least 3, and then also a concluding paragraph. So you can keep that structure in mind. And just sort of overall, keep your readership in mind. So you want your reflection to be easy to follow and you want it to be engaging for your classmates. Finally, some formatting and language tips for you. Of course, you want to write clearly so that your sentences are easy to read and easy to understand. And it's a good idea to use varied sentences and a precise word choice. So if you notice that you have a lot of short, simple sentences, maybe consider sprinkling in some more compound and compound complex sentences, right? Um, with your word choice, don't settle for the easiest one, settle for the best and the most precise one. So instead of saying you got something, perhaps you say you achieved it, right? Instead of using the word good, maybe you use the word excellent. It just depends on what you're going for. But the thesaurus can be your friend in making sure that your word choice is really vivid and really striking. You do also want to avoid grammar and punctuation errors. So, in addition to revising and editing your draft, definitely make sure that you run the spelling and grammar check in Microsoft Word as you're writing. Um, I would definitely strongly advise you to stay away from Grammarly and stay away from Copilot too much because those can easily cross the boundary into making your writing sound AI generated. And if it falls into that gray area, you might be running the risk of getting dinged for plagiarism and for AI generated content. So again, I urge you to stick with sort of the standard spelling and grammar tools and staying away from the AI sort of impelled ones. As far as your tone, this is a narrative sort of style essay, so it's okay to use a personal tone, but it is in an academic space. So you want to make sure that it's still appropriate and that it's still suited for a discussion board post, and keep in mind that all of your classmates will have access to your essay. So be thoughtful about the details that you share. And finally, you'll want to follow MLA style for the entire shebang. That includes the works cited page, your in-text citations, as well as the essay format itself. Just a reminder here that you do need to respond to peers. So I encourage you to read, a bunch of the essays from your classmates. And you're going to post at least one thoughtful reply of 50 words. And hopefully that reply works to expand or deepen the discussion. So, in order to do so, you might reference your own experiences and how you relate to what they have to say. And I encourage you to also use evidence and examples from the novel to help kind of flesh out what it is you're talking about. All throughout the semester, we're going to be using our sources to help support and expand on our ideas. So if you need more help or information, again, refer back to the readings for the unit. I totally expect that as you work, you're going to have to keep jumping back to these readings to look up special cases and to sort of, help you with some of the trickier aspects of MLA style and citations. And I'm always happy to talk to you during office hours. So visit me during office hours or consider using the Writing Center. We all have virtual options if you're not able to come to campus, and we are all happy to help. So thank you for listening, and please let me know if you have any questions.